shown back up 5 minutes later, I just had to throw the crossbow at him. Like that was all I could have done because there's nothing else would have happened in that. Just the adrenaline dump was just so
Yeah.
was so high on that for that buck.
Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of the Texas Public Podcast. It is middle of November, and we are about as fresh as we could be off the recent Kansas hunt, which I wish we could have had a little bit less problems, but, problems kind of help you build a little bit of experience, but we could have done without it at this time. But I'm sitting here with Shane Parker. What's going on, dude?
Oh man, just finally in recovery after that Kansas trip, and finally ready to get back. I guess get the push on the rest of November.
Yeah, I know. It was such a fun trip, man. I really enjoyed being out there and kind of sharing the experience, and appreciate so for those of you that don't know, Shane and I, when we both drew Kansas, we're kind of in a couple of group texts just off and on, and we just decided to kind of team up and kind of find a place to stay and kind of split that up, and no real plans of kind of hunting the same areas, but at least we kind of had somebody to lean on if we had any kind of problems, which that kind of worked out, especially as far as I was concerned, because
Yeah.
the problems came in bunches. But it was a lot of fun, man. And those of you who don't know Shane has Shane, you've done several podcasts all across the landscape now. Shane's very well known for his data collection and experience and intel on thermal hubs, buck hubs and specifics, and kind of buck studies. He's gathered a lot of intel over the years and very good at articulating that so the rest of us can understand, and helped a lot of folks. Still gets a lot of questions about that. Being a southern hunter, hunting the hills, hunting those mixed hardwoods and big woods. So Shane gets a lot of requests for all that. So I feel very privileged that you're spending your time with me here. So I appreciate that.
Oh man, I appreciate it. Yeah, just reflecting back on our hunt out there and how different it is from what I experienced down here too. So I'm trying to apply, I guess, what I learned there, and kind of what I can do maybe better next time when I go out there. So
Yep, and I agree. We're gonna cover a little bit of that because I think some of the big questions that people might have, not only just reflecting on what we learned, but kind of our mindset, kind of being from the South. I mean, you spent some time in the Midwest before. I mean, you spent time in Kentucky. I would say Kansas is a different experience even from that, but it's been a lot of years. We talked about that sometime, and I got some insight that it's been a long time for you. It's been up there when you didn't get a chance to go up and pre-scout. We talked about going up there early season, and trying our hand at it. If it didn't work out, maybe we would at least get to see the landscape, but that didn't happen. But that was no big deal. That was kind of a bonus as far as I was concerned. But so when we get up there, let's just start with there's some meat and potatoes that I wanted to get to, but I mean, for this particular trip, kind of what were your expectations going into the trip as far as what what you wanted to see harvest, or like what your expectations were for the activity and the timing?
yeah, I mean, I really didn't. I had gotten so many different, I guess, from people that had already been there. I've gotten like a wide range of what to expect. They're going to be doing this. They're going to be rutting. They're going to be, So I went in kind of thinking, well, I really don't know what period of the rut they're in and how weather affected that and stuff like that. I really didn't have I maybe had like a generalized idea of what they were doing, but at the same time, I'd heard so many different things from so many people. And I've hunted Nebraska, I've hunted in Missouri, which are neighboring states, but they were completely different areas that I hunted there as compared to what we kind of faced in Kansas. Nebraska area that I hunted was more of the piney woods kind of stuff. And same thing for Missouri. Missouri was more of that area that I hunted in Missouri for so long, is more of like farmland along river bottom, also
Mm-hmm.
with timber. So there's a lot more timber in both of those places than what we experienced. So as far as just the habitat and terrain goes, it's completely different than anything I'd ever tried to whitetail hunt before. So it was just trying to figure out, okay, what are they doing? How's the weather affecting it? And how are these deer reacting to the habitat that they're kind of pinned up into in a way. So it was
Mm-hmm.
just it was like, I think if we'd have had that scouting trip earlier, I
Yeah.
think our expectations would have been more in line.
It.
So
Yeah.
I think
Probably
that's where
so.
we,
Yeah, and to set that stage a little bit, we went kind of the middle of November, a little earlier.
yeah,
The
we were
second
there.
week,
Yeah,
basically.
the ninth. Basically, then I got there on the ninth,
Yep, we
and
weather was kind of marginal just before we got there, but as we were arriving, big front was pushing through, going
yeah,
to plunge it down into the teens. It wasn't
yeah,
going to last. It wasn't going to be that extreme, but for the first 36 hours or so, and then it was going to kind of return to normal, but still very nice. Lows in the 30s, highs in the 50s and early 60s.
yeah,
Like you said, hey, give or take a few days on each side of your expectations. It was like you might see some hard chasing. We might see some lockdown stuff, but it was just kind of maybe a mixed bag. But we were actually trying to beat that. To me, we were trying to beat that
yeah,
lockdown phase, right?
yeah,
We didn't want to
yeah.
go
That was
there.
really what. Yeah, our timing beforehand, we had talked about it that y'all had went the year before when you were filming for Jacob and Andrew, and y'all kind of got in like you kind of talked like, and talked to Andrew and Jacob about it, that about 2 or 3 days in, you felt like you went into lockdown.
Yep.
And so we wanted to kind of time ours a little bit earlier. And I almost feel like that from after hearing people talk about it and hearing other people like afterwards, um, I feel like that rut, although it is timed up pretty much the same every year, the I feel like the weather affects it so much more as to what you see. Like I just feel like the up and down of the weather, I think, had really affected those deer more than anything else. There just wasn't that extended period of cool weather that really got them up on their feet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I feel like more than anything, we had the timing right. We just did not have the weather. And I think, from judging from everything I've heard from people, they experienced the same thing all over the state. So I don't think we felt we were experiencing anything any different than anybody else was. It was just strictly we hit in a really funky weather period, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's you kind of have to keep your mindset relative, to the region. It's like back home, it dropped down to. Of course, it's cold, but those deer up there in 15 to 25-degree weather. I mean, that gets them on their feet and
Yeah.
they're bristled up, they're ready to roll, and they're cruising.
Yeah.
Down here, we're shutting down.
Yeah. Oh
The
yeah.
hunters and
Yeah.
the
I mean, it
deer.
was 13 degrees the I think Monday morning that we were there. It was
Yeah,
13 degrees that morning. It was just Sunday or Monday morning, one of those mornings. And that was the best like movement day I saw of all of it. It was super windy. Um, and that, that it felt like, oh, if that would have just kept up,
yeah,
things would have been much better, or maybe moderated a little bit, but it went from like 13 degrees this morning, high of 35. The next day it is like in the 30s. And then the next day it's in the 60s in the morning, so it did not have the moderation was so quick,
yes,
and then it was just hot, for me
yeah,
from that period on, hot
yeah.
and humid,
And you mentioned something. I should have I maybe should have kind of led with. I spent, and this is how you and I met through Jacob and Andrew filming back in Georgia. But I was with them last year, near in and around the same area, and we got there on the 16th, and we stayed through about the 21st, roughly.
yeah,
And it was very, very much heavy. The bigger bucks were in that lockdown phase. And the deer that we were seeing, and really not a whole lot, mind you, the deer that were on their feet kind of cruising in what you would kind of consider your typical corridors and your funnel type areas, were all the 2 and 3 year olds.
yeah,
Granted, a couple of good, that can still produce a good deer up there, but if you were looking for those 4 and 5 year olds and some of those, those top tier bucks, they just weren't moving like that. And then it was the same thing. We also had uh, basically crappy weather, rainy, somewhat warm until the last 2 days. when it really took a plunge, got cold and still, and then that's when the activity just shot off, and
Yeah.
Jacob saw a few shooters within a day and a half. Andrew shot his buck. Like I said, we didn't even see a lot of bucks. We didn't start to see any bucks from the stand, him and I, until that latter part. But they played it right. They were taking advantage of those bad weather days and really kind of putting in the scouting time and
Hmm.
in preparation for those better days to come. Right. So
Yeah.
for us, I kind of rushed up there Sunday because I wanted to be there every hour. Seemed like it was going to matter leading into that bitter cold temperatures that were just gonna light it up. So it was
Yeah.
I drove all night and then got out of the truck and basically went hunting, and then went hunting scouting, and within 6 hours I was laying in a ditch in a CRP field, 20 yards from the biggest deer of my life. But that's
Yeah.
a little bit for a different story. And without getting into too much detail for what makes sense, but overall, like, what was your strategy that you wanted to look for in the areas? I know you seem like, and this is a knock on me. I I, I didn't have as much. You had more planned. I was going on a little bit of previous knowledge. I'm kind of going to go in and figure it out on the change of conditions. You had some areas that you had picked out that you wanted to go see, but what was your strategy in the areas you were selecting? Was it kind of terrain based, timber based? Did you have any kind of place to start?
Yeah. I mean, well, I had pinned a lot of places, and me and you discussed them beforehand. And so my plan when I first got up there was just to hit the road. Like that first day, I just bounced around to as many places, and I didn't really worry about walking. I just wanted to see where the pressure was. And so the area I picked, I was seeing at every spot that I'd pinned, I was seeing a vehicle at. And I'm talking about the walk-in hunt areas.
Mm-hmm.
So every spot that I'd kind of pinned, there was a vehicle there. So I said, well, I need to hunt. I need to be able to just to get at this point in time. I've hit like 8 places. There've been 8 vehicles there. I've already seen deer harvested. I'm seeing deer on the road getting run over. Bucks crossing, bucks in the field, chasing. So I'm like, okay, my backup plan from that point in time was hit a bigger piece of public that was there. So I did that and quickly realized that's where the pressure really was. Now I saw deer there, but my main thing, as far as what I was looking at, was just diversity.
Mm-hmm.
Areas that had timber, thick timber, cover, because it's it, and then also like a food source. Something to kind of hold the does in, keep them somewhat concentrated, and but it was mainly just that diversity, looking at a lot of edges, things like that. So that was what I was kind of picking out in water, of course. But I still was looking for the terrain, like the steeper terrain, steeper places. So I'd kind of picked out a place on a piece of public that had some steeper terrain. For Kansas, when we're saying
Mm-hmm.
steep, it's still, the elevation is only like 60 feet, but it was still steep terrain, and immediately found huge deer sign there. So they definitely are utilizing that steeper terrain where it's available. But that seemed to be where everybody else was kind of piled into.
That's right.
And so I immediately had to, I felt like I wasted a day of really good hunting on that, a full day. Um, but it was just because there was so much pressure there. I felt like
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up bumping a really good buck that I think that was the buck that everybody was kind of after in that area. Ended up bumping him out of his bed on the first full day of hunting that I'd been there. And so bumped him completely out of bed. Ended up bumping into 2 or 3 guys that were hunting around there, and just said, you know what, this isn't worth it. I've got to get away from people. Like and that's when you can tell by my tread. You're like, what? You're like 30 miles from where I expected you to be, or 40 miles. You're like, you're going to be in a different state before it's over.
Yeah.
And that's basically what I did. I just tried to get away from people. And so, um, and at that point in time, I was kind of looking for the same thing, like just diversity. Like, and I was looking for kind of the smaller walk-in hunt areas, not so much the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just kind of those medium-sized ones that had diversity on them. They had fields, they had, you know, a creek running through them, water, and usually wherever you find water, you find timber and things like that in that area. So that's what I was kind of pivoting off of, and immediately found a massive buck that I videoed, and sent you the video. I think you had just tagged out. I guess that's for a different
Yeah,
time, but you had just killed that day, and I ran into a an absolute slammer of a buck and just stumbled upon that area.
yeah,
They ended up spending a lot of time in before I kind of got sick and had to bail out. But
yeah,
and it was the same thing. It was something unique. There was brassicas that the landowner had planted for his cattle. Had a creek run through it. Had timber. Had CRP. It just had everything, you know.
yeah,
And like we talked about, if I had more room to have hunted that other than just the section that I was on, I think I would have been able to kill one of those bucks. You know, it ended up having, an encounter with the biggest buck I've ever seen on the hoof.
yeah.
Um,
I've got that earmarked for at the end. So,
yeah, yeah.
uh,
So,
yeah.
and
So,
then once we pivoted off of that, it was just just trying to hit as many places as I could. You know, at that point in time, like when things when 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 the heat ramped up and they just started moving in the daytime or in the morning and late at night, that happened real quick. I
mm-hmm.
spent the rest of my day period just bouncing around to places just to see if I could catch one crossing the road or out in the field or something, and ended up, you know, almost stalking one out in the middle of a cornfield. So
Yeah, that's right. Um, so if back up just a bit to when you bailed on that first kind of area that you were hunting, I mean, you passed a buck that in there that another guy in there come behind you and shot.
yeah,
That
yeah,
the bit a
yeah,
7 point you said.
yeah.
You were in the deer sign, and you even sent me some pictures of. I mean, you were in some really shaded out kind of cedar areas where you just found it looked like just a buck's bedroom.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
you
We
know,
talked about, yeah, that the couple of places that I found in that around that in that one area. Like I don't feel like anybody was hunting those areas, and that's why that deer was there. But it was just phenomenal. Like
yeah,
you just don't see that kind of stuff where what I'm hunting. You know, when they say you find a buck's bedroom in the Midwest, I know what you're talking about now
yeah.
for sure. You know,
So and so you were finding a lot of, particularly probably in and around that particular area that we're referring to. You were finding a lot of good sign, and then all of a sudden you were in like big sign, like scrapes the size of a living room rug. You know, you kind of
yeah,
you kind of talked about like 10 by 10 area, like almost so big you almost don't realize it's a scrape
yeah,
type of
yeah,
stuff, right? So, but so you ended up, and you even mentioned you're like if you could have hunted this 3 weeks ago, or
yeah,
something, or it just would have been, you could have killed this deer that calls this place home. But you chose that it wasn't really right for just given the current conditions, and I'm sure that's a whole lot of factors, the people, the phase, the
yeah,
timing, whatever that is. So
yeah.
ultimately, you ended up kind of leaving out of that area. So that's what I was kind of curious. Like, what led to you saying, "Well, I just don't think it's going to happen right here, though."
Well, I mean, when I saw, I got into pretty fresh sign right off the bat, and it was big sign that I was like, this is like 2 weeks old. But there was also there were scrapes, huge scrapes all around this one CRP field, and it was a split CRP, and the other half of it was soybeans that the farmers had cut. And so there were soybeans everywhere. So the does were all feeding on that. But all of the sign that I was finding in there was like 2 weeks old.
Mm-hmm.
And the tracks that were in the scrape specifically were old. There were some new ones, but they weren't the big massive tracks. Like I could tell this buck that did this is a higher end. And I was seeing 2.5, 3.5 year old bucks. And like I said, passed up that one that the guy ended up killing. Um, but just judging by the amount of sign that was in, like, especially in that buck's bedroom, like where I ended up jumping that buck at, um, wasn't anywhere around where I had to work. I tell you that much. Like, I had to literally dig that buck out of his bed. Like,
Yeah.
I remember walking up saying, I'm about to jump something here. And sure enough, there he was. And by then it was too late. Like, it was just a matter of seconds. But he was, you know, he was somewhere looking back at it where I'm like, that's why he was there. He had done moved off. He had gotten so much pressure from the highway and from lazy hunters that I think he was just in a spot that he knew. And if you looked at it on a map, you'd be like, yeah, there's nobody getting to that unless you do what I did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm not saying what I did was anything special. I just did what I always do, which is there's the deer are not here that I'm wanting to kill. I got to go find it, and I just started walking. You know, and I could tell the area I was in. Nobody had ever been in there. You know, it just looked completely like there's no deer, there's no human sign here.
Yeah.
There's no trails, there's no nothing, and it really didn't even look like there was a buck there. Like there was no really sign that anything that a buck would have been there. All of his scrapes and rubs had kind of just stopped at a certain point,
From his
and then he just
previous.
got into this thick timber on this steep ridge with like a high, thick CRP and just somewhere nasty that you really wouldn't want to go into. And I just piled off in it, and sure enough, there he was, and he bailed off into this impenetrable, you know, like creek bottom that you couldn't have crawled in there and got him out if you'd wanted to. He would have been out the other end of it.
Yeah.
And after doing that and bumping him out there, I'm like, well, this I bumped him out of one place he probably felt pretty secure into. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the chances he's not going to come back here. It's a good ambush spot, but you'd have to really work at it to get it. And I just didn't feel like fighting those people, and I just pivoted off of that because I'm like, that was my chance with him.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't have more day. I don't have enough days to really wait him to come back. You know,
Yeah.
and
And
so
that,
I figured he would have a rotation. He'd eventually come back, but it might be 3 or 4 days later. You know, he would it wasn't one of those bump and dumps like I'm gonna sit here. Like I watched him hightail it
yeah.
way out of town.
He
You know,
he had no interest in stopping to see what you were, but
yeah, no, yeah, he was not. He was obviously safe in that spot. I bumped him out of it, and he's getting out of Dodge. He's going completely in a different county almost. You know,
yeah.
so
So, well, what when we talk a lot about sign, people, that's what you dream about, going up there and finding some real big sign, which you did. I found some good sign, but nothing like you ended up finding. But you were like in the sign quick and on the bucks quick, and I was kind of still in the process of searching for something like that. But I mean, what was the advice that you were getting about sign in the area? And then how did that end up being comparable to what you experienced? What did it matter that much? What I mean, did it really play a big part?
I think no, it didn't really. I mean, because all the sign was just like I had been told. You know, I talked to a couple of people up there, and they're like, if you want, if you want to hunt that rut sign, the scrapes being laid down, you need to come during this period of time because
Mm-hmm.
they tend to do it like 2 weeks because I'm used to hear a trickle rut,
Yeah.
um, which that it's like a few does go in, a few does go in, a few does go in, and it can take because everything's kind of mishmashed. Bucks are laying down sign for like 3 months, and they're laying it down for like a 2 week period, and so that was my thought going in is all this sign didn't mean anything to me. The younger bucks are still using it,
Mm-hmm.
but I knew the bigger bucks had probably peeled off the does they wanted initially, and they weren't in that seeking phase. They had already, and I think, like I said, I think the weather played a big factor into that and the pressure as far as where I was hunting. So I thought, well, if the deer are here, I'm gonna try to go somewhere where there's not pressure. Not really gonna worry about sign. I'm gonna worry about track sign. And so that's what and visually, like I wanted to lay eyes on something. That was basically what I pivoted off of. Is okay. The buck sign, I had to dig to find the buck.
Mm-hmm.
Now what I need to do now is just go lay eyes on one and then try to put a plan together. Like
Yeah.
that was my pivot point from basically seeing what everybody else had done is okay. Finding the sign's old, and I had to really dig to get this buck out of here to to lay eyes on him. I need to just hit the road and pivot off of that and just try to lay eyes on one, and then see if he's close to somewhere that I can hunt. You know.
Yeah. And I think, I hear people talking about that concept, and I had that on my mind as well, but it, it just you're I was never I can't get used to that idea because it just doesn't happen down here.
Yeah.
You can't get a game plan on a buck that you spotted from a road somewhere. Really, it's really just not going to
No.
happen. So, but up
No.
there, it is a very real possibility, and there's a lot of people that make a living off hunting in that type of
Yeah.
style. So when you get up
Yeah.
there, you have to be open to the idea that that may be the opportunity you get.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
that's what I was faced with those first few hours. I mean, I was kind of thrust into it, probably somewhat unprepared. I feel like it I did as good as I could do without getting an arrow in the deer, but that was a realistic point for me that kind of woke me up and said, "Hey, this is going to be different."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You got to be willing to do it. You got to, and then
Mhm.
and also it made me think about you as well, being a ground hunter for the
Yeah.
most part. I mean, how was your approach? Was your approach any different going to some place like Kansas versus back home? Hunting from the ground quite a bit.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's a ground hunter's paradise out there. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, especially during the rut, that period that we were there. Now, if you were coming up, setting up on the sign like I found, you were setting up in the bedroom and things like that, yeah. But I think once you get out of that period, the ground hunting is the way to go from that point on. And I think if you struggle with that, you'll struggle up there because everything's going to kind of be, you've got to be able to get down and move at a moment's notice and just be able to just kind of maneuver your way around the landscape
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of times, especially if you have bad weather, that was the one thing that that uh, I saw, and again, hearing from other people is the bigger deer, even though it may not be locked down yet, they'll hole up in those little brushy drainages that almost look like they don't have anything into them, and you have to go get them.
Mm-hmm.
Like you either have to sit up and have a way to sneak in and get yourself an ambush point for them to drop down out of them, or you have to be able to maneuver yourself into getting a shot on them while they're in the bed or when they get up and move.
Yep.
So if you're not used to ground hunting in that kind of situation, um, it would be tough out there. And like the buck that I ended up stalking, like I'm just scouting a little piece, and I just glance over and he's coming up through another piece of weehaw, like just walking right through the middle of it. I'm talking like when I looked at him, I was like, that's not a very big, that's like, I looked at the horns first. I couldn't see very many horn. I'm like, that doesn't look like he has a very big of a rack. Pulled up binoculars and I could tell his body looked like a tank, like he looked like a cow coming across that field. And I'm
Yeah.
still 200 or 300 yards away. And I looked at the rack. I'm like, that's a good buck. Like I could tell at that point in time, and that's just something we don't deal with that. Like now, I
Mm-hmm.
see him. I've got to get. The terrain sets up to do that kind of stuff. And so from that point on, it was like a 45 minute. Like I'm rushing to because we're like an hour before daylight ends. And I've got to cover 300 yards in the wide open, and that's where being able, just like I think if that would have been here, I'd have been like, okay, that deer, I saw him. Now there's no way, I have to maneuver the terrain. I might bump him. Like you don't think that's just not something we're accustomed to having to do. So at that point in time, I had to figure out how can I put a stalk on this deer. Like in the wide open.
Yeah.
You know,
Is that the one you ended
and
up paralleling through the
yeah,
through
I
the,
ended up
across the
paralleling
field?
him through
Like
the middle of a
he
cornfield.
kind of knew you were there. He just
Oh, he would look over at me. Yeah, and I mean, I'm like 80 yards away, and I got a crossbow. That's another thing that really I hunted almost specifically out of a cross with a crossbow up there, and I still couldn't get the mindset out to I've got to cover ground. Like I probably could have harvested him, but I just never. Looking back on it, like I got within like 60 yards of that buck,
Mm-hmm.
and never thought, hey, I could put a bolt in him. And it come, it just one of those things. Even with that, everybody says crossbow gives you advantage. Sure, not if you don't if you don't use it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I ended up running him into a. He was still on the weehaw, but he ended up going into kind of some thicker cover right at dark, and I had closed the distance to about 60 yards. And there's a game warden watching the whole thing, from her truck. She's like, I thought you were about to get him, like I was like, yeah, I did too. But but yeah, I would parallel him, and I'm like in a ditch that's like not even knee deep on, like crawling this crossbow, trying to get within range. And he'd sit over there and look at me. He's like, as long as I keep him at that distance, I'm okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sure enough, he made it.
Yeah, and that was I mean, you had some really kind of cool encounter with local folks. I mean, you talked to a few folks,
Yeah,
quail hunters. You had game wardens just kind of watching you on your perch out there glassing and watching deer walk by your truck, and they're they're
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
you were putting
yeah,
on a show
yeah.
out
She's
there.
like, I thought you had him. Like, she's like, I thought I was about to see somebody kill. Kill. She's like, I've seen that buck. I don't know how many times on this road. She's like, I figured somebody was eventually going to get him. But yeah, another thing that's kind of shocking to me is like, there's way more quail hunters than deer hunters out there. Like, I had this. I'll put it to you this way: y'all people that hunt Kansas and y'all hunt it, y'all don't have a clue what actual pressure is. Like you simply don't have a clue. Like I saw it a little bit on some of your bigger public, but even that I would say is a fraction of what I see down here,
Yeah,
and probably a fraction of what you see. And once
yeah,
you get away from that, there's no pressure. Like those people don't even think deer hunters exist.
yeah. And when you
You
kind of
know?
caught like Chris off guard with some of that, the way you
Yeah.
described some of the Kansas pressure, because they were just talking about Chris Lebert talking about how it gets hammered, and it's like
Nope.
yes, but no. I
Yeah.
mean, you had to kind of navigate your way to put you end up in that scenario, but once you did, I mean, it was just like you had this whole landscape to yourself almost.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
uh,
I had quail hunters helping me. Like here's a buck here. I saw six here. Here's one over here. There's a big one down here. Like they were just willing to just like free with their time. With their intel.
yeah.
Like that dude. Literally, I walked up to him. He's like, "Are you going to go in there and hunt?" I'm like, no, I just walked in there. I can tell you right now, there's no quail in there. He's like, well, that's good because I was about to waste like an hour. I was like, but have you seen any, have you seen a big buck? And he said, yeah, there's like a 170 or 180 right over here in the, like at a place that I didn't even have a pin on. I was like, when did you see it? He said, this morning at 9 o'clock. And so I
Mm-hmm.
go over there and what I do, that buck is literally walking through the middle of a field. And I sit there and glassed him for, 30 minutes, 40 minutes,
Yeah.
and ended up that was where we ended up having the just multitude of bucks in that one area. Now how I didn't kill one in there, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I'm sure you've thought about it more than you care to mention since you got
Yeah,
back a little bit.
yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah, a few of the things that I kind of reflected on were I experienced some of the same things. I went to kind of a bigger swath of land, a bigger swath of public, but it stretched over several miles. A big landscape. So you kind of think you can you'll find your little pockets, and if you had the time to do that, maybe you could. But the other thing is, we were only working. I mean, I was only consider myself to be working with about 5 days at the most
yeah,
for myself. So it was like, if you spend 2 full days, 2.5, maybe even 4, because it was just, I didn't know how it was going to go, and I knew I was going to start feeling the pressure from the wife, like when you getting back, so,
mm-hmm.
and that is really, I mean, what would be a good time frame to give yourself when going in a place like that under those conditions? I mean, and
Oh, I mean, clearly you can get it done quick. I think it all depends on your what you're wanting to do.
Yeah.
You know, if you're wanting to kill, like, if you're wanting to kill something much better, just much better than what you could kill at home, and you said, okay, this is my range of bucks, I want to kill something 130 to 150. I mean, you can do that pretty easy. I mean, not I wouldn't say pretty easy, but I mean, you did it,
Mm-hmm.
and I could have, you know, I passed up one that's in that range, you know,
Yeah.
and probably if I'd have really like said that's what I want to do, probably in a day or two I could probably got it done, you know.
Yeah.
So it's all in what you're wanting to do. But if you're wanting to kill something exceptional, like outside of the norm of what you normally kill, you can definitely. I can tell you right, you can. They're there,
Yes.
and there's more of them there than they are most places.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's I can guarantee you that, and they're out in the open, like you can see them,
Yeah.
so you know they exist. I mean, I saw 7 bucks that I would say would go over 170.
Yeah.
So I know they're there. Um, and if you set your sights on that, you're going to need, unless you just luck up and you can put a stalk on one or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to kind of, you know, mount an offensive to kill one, you need 5 or 6, 7 days. You know,
Yeah.
the best thing I would tell everybody to do, had we been able to go out there and scout somewhere in early October when the first sign was kind of being laid down and get a feel for things,
Mm-hmm.
it would make things much easier, you know.
Yeah.
But not having that, it's kind of like your 2 or 3 days of scouting, and then by then, if you only got 3 days left or 4 days left, you're like, I've got to kill something, you know.
Yeah.
So you just don't have that time to really, you know, put in.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, I wouldn't go during that period of time that we went. I would have went a week earlier. Um, I would avoid that. I would have. What I would say is I would avoid that 2 week period in the middle of November. A lot of people would say that's the best time to go,
Yeah.
but it's also like the weather affects them. I feel like more during that period of time. You know, if it's warm
Mm-hmm.
during that period of time, they just shut down. If it's
Mm-hmm.
warm like 2 weeks earlier, I think they're like that. You know, I've got to lay down a sign. Like I got to let
Yeah.
people know
It's
I'm here. Like it's a different. You know,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And it's like I feel like almost the bigger bucks said it's hot. I'm uncomfortable. I've got a doe. I'm just gonna hang out here and her with her until it gets the last 30 minutes of daylight. First 30 minutes of daylight. They moved during that period of time. If you weren't somewhere where they were moving, you had
Yeah.
to go find them. You know.
Yeah. And that area is so fun because it's a blessing and a curse because you do see you will just at some point accidentally lay eyes on a really big deer, but he might be 300 yards away, and seeing him is
Yeah.
great, but getting next to him
Oh,
is
it's a
a
whole
totally
different other
different.
animal.
It really is. And to go back to your point earlier about ground hunting and buying into that sort of tactic. If you cut that out of your game plan, you are putting yourself at a disadvantage right off the bat. If you say you're a
Oh
timber
yeah.
hunter, I'm going to be in a tree. That's what I do. Like, that's great. I'm just telling you that you're you enjoy sitting in the timber, and you may not see one of that caliber. You've got to keep yourself open and an open mind,
Yeah.
and whether you fail at it or not, but you better be ready to at least make an attempt
Yeah.
because that's
Yeah. I
how
mean,
those
yeah.
deer navigate just by default the way they navigate the landscape. They're going to put themselves and you're going to see them, and if you've got
Yeah.
to try to make a play.
Yeah. They don't fear the open terrain. You know, like that is very comfortable for them, and they're actually safe in that open terrain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
yeah, if
like
you
they use it like it's cover, you know, because they're safe in it. They're not getting gun pressure. So I think that would
yeah
add I think if Kansas was if they had a 3 week gun season or a 4 week gun season or something like that instead of like 3 or 4 days, it'd be a whole different ball game.
yeah
But they just don't feel that 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 fear of the open
yeah
area.
every
It's
time they
almost like
stepped
it's
out
just yeah,
in the open, thunder cracked. They'd get
yeah.
they
They'd
would.
be a whole different animal, but they just
Yeah.
don't. And so it creates a whole different. It's a whole different. animal you're chasing there. It's they're not seeking out that cover so much
Yeah.
as they're using the cover, the smallest amount of cover. That's kind of the biggest thing is don't look if you're going out there to hunt, don't look at the largest amounts of cover. Look at the areas that are wide open that have just these little pockets of cover.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where I saw the most sign and the most deer, like in the oak, like
Yeah.
and you could actually get to them. Were those little pockets of cover that are maybe just at the head of a small drainage, but it's just wide open around them.
Yeah.
You know,
It really blows your mind what they're willing to use.
yeah,
And effectively so. They
yeah,
it
oh
obviously
yeah,
works for them, but it will really put you in your place when you get out there as
yeah,
far as where you start seeing them. And it's like, oh, dang, is that if that's where they're going to be, I got to do something different.
yeah,
It's kind of the
yeah,
way I felt.
mm-hmm.
And to go back to two pieces of sort of advice and perspectives that I had somebody tell me and tell us. We talked about it on the way up there. Not overthinking it.
Mm-hmm.
When I got there, I ran into actually two other guys from Texas. They pulled in the same parking spot as me, and they were like, "You going in here?" And I was like, "Hey, I'm going in there to scout and check it out." And they're like, "Yeah, our friend." And it was a small place. Our friend killed a 10 point over there last week, and I was like, "Oh, man, that's great,"
Yeah,
And he was like, "But we've been up here, a few years. There's still be some more in there," and I believe him.
yeah,
But he was like, "Man, just when you're up here, just don't overthink it. Just go hunt them." And I was like, "Okay." And we
mm-hmm.
even said the same thing. But the problem that I had was, I took that mindset a little bit and adopted it, and I said, "Well, just let me approach it that way for the first 36 hours or so." But I feel like everybody was going with that mindset. Hey, don't overthink it. Just go hunt. And we were all ending up in the same damn places.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Big,
yeah,
big swaths of timber. The
mm-hmm.
biggest, thickest timber blocks with creeks in them, and just going at where the intersections were. And then
Yeah,
every time you
oh
walked
yeah,
in there was a guy, and then there was a guy 200 yards over this way, and then there was. I ran into trucks everywhere I went, and multiple trucks
mm-hmm.
at the parking spaces.
Yeah,
So, with that, and you even mentioned that when we were going up there, not overthinking it. I mean, reflecting on that now for you, and you were like, man, I just don't want to overthink it. I mean, what does that mean to you now? Now looking back.
oh, I mean, I wouldn't looking back now. I wouldn't have wasted those two perfectly good temperature days on trying to overthink things, like trying to find the sign, read the sign, do this and that and the other. Yeah, just don't even worry about that. Like sign
Uh,
is good if you're hunting during the time they're on the sign,
yeah.
but don't try to read anything into it, and just go. Like my advice to anybody on as far as like don't overthink it is I think the mindset that I eventually got to was what I would tell anybody is go try to lay eyes on them.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not somewhere where you can put a stalk or kind of put it to bed or think or something like that, move on to the next one. Like don't just sit and okay, I found a buck. Let me put a game plan in place. Like I thought about that at first with that one really big deer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually posted something about it. Like, okay, I'm gonna put a game, and then I thought I ain't gonna put a game plan in place for this buck because I have no clue what this buck is doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I don't know why he's here at this moment. All I know is somebody jumped him, and in that day I saw him, and I never saw that buck again. But I hunted the area that he was in just to be hunting,
Mm-hmm.
and saw 5 or 6 shooters in that one area, and never saw him again.
Yeah. That's a good
So
point.
it it really is. Um, Sorry, my thing here kind of popped off for a second.
Oh,
It really is just don't overthink things. Just put yourself where deer would be, and don't try to put a game plan in place. You don't really have time to.
yeah. And that was kind of what, when you were, in that first area you were in and you were talking about the encounters and the cover that was in there and the sign. And I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, okay, Shane's fixing to kind of settle in and pick it apart. Then you went 30 miles
Yeah,
north, and I was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
okay, well, but when I wasn't that surprised because it was for all the reasons you already described previously. But and then the other piece of advice that I thought was good. You mentioned it, and I actually since we've gotten home, I've heard this perspective again as well. If you see a small buck like a spike, something real small, a little subordinate type buck, and he's at a crossing from a field to a timber line, or if you just see one middle of the day, and he's kind of sitting and he's looking back. If he's on the edge of a CRP field and he's headed into some timber, kind of pay attention to where he's looking and looking back. And if he's looking back into an open field, don't disregard it. And if he's going into the timber, it was the perspective I heard, which I kind of found to be true, was like what they would kind of float, or these bigger deer would be kind of in relation to them, where those spikes would have gone out there, and they're kind of looking back, and you can say there might be a big deer out there where he just came from,
Yeah.
in the open, not in the timber side. He just
Hmm.
went in the timber, but why did he come from over there from this open area?
Yeah.
He's probably just kind of circumventing or satelliting around kind of what he sees going on, but he's going. And you kind of mentioned that. I was like, hey, somebody told you, like, if you see a little small buck, don't just discount it.
Hmm. Oh
You
yeah.
know.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing, just like that the big one that the quail hunter, like when I posted up there and got on the edge of that, overlooking where I thought that boat might be. I mean, I didn't see him. Like he didn't come out for 40 minutes, but when I popped up there, there was a young buck. There was like a little spike out in that field, a doe, and he was hounding that doe pretty not hard, but he was he'd give her a run every now and then. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, and they kept looking back across the road, and then some more does popped out, and another younger buck, and then a shooter popped out, and they all kind of went on their own way, and then 20 minutes later, after they had already gotten in that field and were feeding, then the big boy popped out, and he was all to himself, and he didn't care one bit about anything that was going on. He kind of slow trailed that one doe, but yeah, I mean it was kind of seeing that group and how they kind of reacted and where he came out of. He didn't come out of anything thick. He'd been laying up in one of those, like, same thing I'm talking about. If you looked at that area, it was just a little strip of cedars, and it wasn't very much to it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where he had been, because everything to the other side of that was a completely open field that I had already glassed. So I know he wasn't in that area. So
Yeah.
he just been laid up in those cedars along with those other deer. There were probably like 7 or 8 deer laid up in those cedars with him, and he was just the last one to pop out.
Yeah. When it came to the thick cover, and we kind of may have already kind of alluded to this sort of in general, but did was the cover was what we would consider like thick cover up there as thick as you thought it would be, or more so, or as far as what the deer were using? I mean, they kind of seem like they could be in anything during that time frame. I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean, I didn't really see them in the thick cover that much. They kind of run the edges of it,
mm-hmm,
more than anything. They didn't really want to dive off into thick stuff. Like once you got in those cedars where the cedars were just like, basically just like this, you didn't find any sign in any of that. And here we wouldn't really find that anyway, but you'd find it with like mountain laurel that would be like that. And they'll use that mountain laurel here. There they just skirted the side around the edges of it. Or they would kind of bed up in it. Like that's what I found a lot of. I saw those little clusters like that had like that then opened up into like scraggly stuff where it's like grass and like shrubs and stuff, like shorter, um, smaller, younger, less mature kind of timbers sparkled amongst it.
mm-hmm,
If I saw that and it butted right into that thick cedar stuff, it's almost like I think they use that as like a buffer. And so that's where I'd find a lot of sign, a lot of beds, and you could tell, like, if I were going back there and I were hunting mid October, that's where I'd be.
yeah,
Like just set on the edge of that buffer stuff right where it comes in because that's what they're coming to bed into, or they're exiting out of to bed into. But as far as the thicker cover, like I mean, sure the small pockets of it, but the big stuff they didn't really fool with very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
They do like running the creek bottoms, they like doing that.
Yeah, and that's a typical notion that, what the deer that I shot was in relation to a creek bottom.
Yeah,
I wasn't down in the bottom. I was kind of up on a kind of the side terrain feature, right at where the steepest point met a place that was a little bit more ease of crossing coming up out of the river, and it was actually a river crossing there. So it was actually a lot going on right there. But it was in relation to a bottom, but it wasn't one of these long, timber corridors type bottom
yeah,
that you just look across the landscape and you see it stretching. That you and
yeah,
it wasn't real narrow either. It was it was a little wider than it seemed on the map. But
yeah.
um,
The one place that I did like, as far as like timber goes too, that one place that I picked out, and I didn't. I mean, I picked it out because they had two huge blocks of timber that were just fingers that were kind of off to the side, and then you had this one little creek that ran between them. That it was probably a quarter of a mile, half a mile long, that just connected those two big blocks of timber.
hmm
And inside in the timber I'm talking about, also up on the ridges were nothing but like cedar and sparkle. We looked at it and said that looks amazing. And sure enough, driving by there, it's just covered with big rubs. Um, but the way they used it was way different. I think the does were using those places, and they're kind of bedding up along the edges of that. And the only reason the bucks were there is they were just cutting them off in between those two. They were using that little strip of timber that is in that creek bottom right there, and it's pretty open on both sides of it. Um, they were just hanging out downwind of that. I feel like
hmm
one side or the other, and if a doe cut through there, they would just come pick her off and trailer back out into the thick cover. And
yeah.
I think that's why that was so effective. And that's what I think, if you're going up there, kind of look for that. Kind of look for the bigger blocks of timber or bigger areas that the does would kind of bed up into, and look to where they connect with a different area where you can get multiple doe groups that are kind of crisscrossing.
Yes.
And then the bucks are going to be somewhere. They're going to be, and like we saw, there's going to be a bunch of them. Like
Yeah.
they're just going to kind of hang out in that area. And they may not be using those two blocks of timber, but they're going to be cutting that connecting point at some
Yes.
point in time.
Yeah, and that was really as a better way you described it of the area that I ended up killing that deer. To me, it didn't have giant buck written on it, but it was a place where there were going to be a lot of deer,
Yeah,
and then also a place where in my mind I had identified two different really areas of bedding that were in pretty good timber blocks, but one of them was pretty unique. It was actually off the road on a big side hill slope next to the river. But and I jumped. I saw deer when I was down in there scouting. They came down off that hillside and were coming down the river crossing. And I was also jumping does close in the bottom where there was a bunch of blowdowns and real thick stuff like little not canary grass, but like those little sea oats, like cane type
yeah,
cover. There was just does all in there, but there was a ton of buck sign, several hundred yards back up by the crops.
mm-hmm.
So I was way behind all that stuff, but really specific kind of different types of doe bedding. Lot of feed sign right in there. There was some giant pin oaks that were back there dropping. There was just a lot of activity going on, and like you said, my standards were, you know, something at least a little bit better than I would shoot back home. But I was
Yeah,
kind of hunting the experience as well, and just given the time frame, I was willing to, look, shoot a 3-year-old, a decent, nice 3-year-old, maybe a 4-year
yeah,
old that were, and that's, I saw does that morning going right back into the bedding. I had does come out across the river crossing, and then finally later that morning, about 11:15, the right doe,
yeah. Brought
she
the right.
came across, she brought the right buck right through there, and I happened to be in a good just little terrain pinch, like super steep, and I was just right at the end of the super steep riverbank where there was just a bunch of trails cutting up, crossing
Yeah.
from the other part of the road where the side hill bedding was, thick timber, coming across the river, going up to this side that also had the crop fields and cut corn on the far side of it, you
Yeah.
know, middle of the day. So, and it was
Yeah.
funny because I was texting you, and you're probably the only thing that kept me in the tree those last 10 minutes because I was about ready to get down, and
Yeah.
you're just sideways, don't know which buck to aim at or shoot over where you're at, and I'm just like, man. And I even mentioned to you, you were talking about, I feel like I'm in the right area. I'm just not on the spot yet, but I'm getting
Yeah.
close. And I said, well, you're trying to you're in the right area. You're trying to get on the spot. I just feel like I'm in a spot, like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
but
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
may have strategically, and I tell you what, as far as when you go back to the ground hunting, I struggled so bad to find good trees to hunt. I'm
Oh
telling
yeah.
you, it was
Yeah.
maddening. And the tree
Yeah.
that I went in, I think it was just a big giant cottonwood or something, but I had the Amsteel, you know, um,
Maxed out.
maxed out.
Yeah.
It was insane. I mean, it took me forever, and I was like, this is just ridiculous because most of the trees are like this anyway.
Yeah.
They're either like this, or they're as wide as a car,
Yeah.
which is really great. It all looks beautiful, and then when you get in there, it's like just totally different landscape. But then you start thinking about, wow, what the hell? Where the hell am I going to get in?
Yeah.
But I was perfectly willing to just sit on the ground too. I brought stuff to ground hunt, and then I was tried to keep an open mind as far as that concerned. I got lucky in it. It didn't end up coming to be a big factor, but I guess when we get close to wrapping it up here, that I kind of wanted you to recap that last kind of interaction with that really really big deer from the ground because um and I kind of cap it off from what I saw when you came out of the timber.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you had an encounter, so I don't know if there's a whole lot to the setup, really. I mean, for what he came by, but you had a decoy out, so talk a little bit about that and how that kind of
Yeah.
transpired.
I mean, I had went in there that day before and saw that. Well, I actually 2 days before that afternoon is when I caught that uh, the big buck that the quail hunter told me about, and I watched him go into that little patch with a couple other good bucks, a couple of shooters, and so the next morning I sat up in there and I didn't see anything. Like I had both, I could tell there was deer around, but um, nothing came my way. And I ended up getting up on a perch where I could overlook the whole area
Mm-hmm.
that middle of the day, and ended up seeing um, three shooters in that big field, and they were all coming out of like two different spots in this big field. So the field was like a clover field that they had run cattle through, but there hadn't been cows in there in probably several weeks. So the clover was up pretty good, and there was just a ton of deer funneling into that area. So that afternoon, I backed out after seeing those, and I decided to get down along the edge, and I got up into a point where they were coming out of, but the private was on the other side. And I remember I had the two bucks that came out that afternoon,
Mm-hmm.
but they stayed on the private and never would cross the creek. I couldn't get a shot at them. I had them both. I had one of them within 20 yards, and he's probably a 160, and he's in the creek, and I can hear him breathing, and I'm sitting there, and I just can't shoot him because he's on private, on another piece of private that you can't get into. So had there was a lot of bucks in there at that point in time, and I remember telling you, there's no sign. Like if you walked in there, there's no scrapes, there's no
Yes.
rubs, there's nothing, but that creek is just filled with big buck tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was seeing deer coming out of that creek bottom. So the next morning, we decided um, that you would get up on the high point and film down in there. And I set up a decoy, and it was kind of the creek kind of meandered through there. And I got in the bend of it where there's some field fence, some cattle fence, barbed wire fences, stuff like that that stretched all around this whole area. And I got into a point where the creek made a bend, made an oxbow, and the fence also cut that area off. And I got right in that little corner of that fence, and I could shoot the whole area where I um, my decoy set out in front of me about 40 yards away. I could shoot that entire flat,
Mm-hmm.
and on the other side of the creek was the private. I couldn't shoot that, and I could shoot um, almost back down to the creek. And so I'm facing kind of north, and had a good buck that come through the creek, like I could hear him splashing through the creek. And he crossed out and he went over on the private on the side. And I said, I think that's one of the shooters I saw yesterday. And I watched him. He ended up going over there and bedding down right on the creek, bank of the creek.
That's the one
And
you
he
sent me
bedded,
a picture of him,
yeah,
like
he
bedded
just said,
down. He was kind of facing you, I think, too. He was kind of
yeah,
looking your direction when you took
he
that
was on
picture.
that facing out into that, looking out into the little field there where I was at.
Mm-hmm.
And he finally, after like I think 45 minutes, he got up and just left. I think another buck come through and he got with him and they took off. I think that's actually what happened. Um, and at that same time, a little bit after that, a small buck come from behind me, and you filmed it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I can hear this buck stomping, and so I'm turning around, trying to lay eyes on this buck because I thought he kept acting funny, like there's something behind him,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, well, this there's got to be something following this buck. So I kind of like I'm facing, I kind of turn like that, kind of look, and he bounds off and goes off on the other side and goes into the other field, like crosses the ditch, goes into the next field over. And I'm like, do you see anything behind him? You're like, no, there's nothing behind him. I don't see, and I don't know where he came. You were like, I don't know where he came from. I said, I think he come right out of this creek right
Mm-hmm.
behind me, and just because right behind me was like a ditch that's like 12 foot deep, and it's where the cows have got trails going all up through it. And I'm pretty sure he came up out of that, and that's where I had seen just those enormous buck tracks,
Mm-hmm.
like in the cow trails. And so I'm kind of hedging that way, and then all of a sudden, to my right, like I hear water splashing, and it's real quick. It's like splash, splash, and then I hear leaves crunching real close, and I'm like slowly turning my body that way, and all of a sudden, at like 8 yards, I mean, like the where I'm sitting at is my back to a big tree and a fence post, and there's like a brush pile right here, so I've got really good cover, and then it drops off like down about 5 foot, and it's like right there, like I could take and throw a rock and hit the bottom of that. Like it's just right there. And I look over there and there's like a 200-inch buck standing in that little dip, looking at my decoy. And I'm like completely turned the other way. Like, and he's
Oh.
just sitting there looking, and he's and I could tell, like I'm looking at him out of the corner of my eye, like I'm trying not to hyperventilate, like this is a massive buck, like 8 yards, like. And so I mean I had to perform some sort of acrobatics trying to get this, get turned like as slow as possible, almost like on like a pendulum, but I couldn't because there's also a brush pile like right here. So I have to go up. I had to move also going up and leaning back against the tree
Mm-hmm.
and trying to get the gun, to get the crossbow just right here. Like, and I got it right to him, but the only part I can see is the front of his head, like from his, like just behind the ears forward, and there's a big tree. And he's behind that big tree. I have no shot other than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten my crossbow all the way up, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to shoot it opposite handed, looking down, like, and I've got him in my sights. I'm looking at him, and I'm like, I'm just going to shoot this deer in the head. Like, I don't have a choice, like at this point in time, that's what I was contemplating. And about the time I'm like, I don't want to do this, sometimes you just make life or death choices, like
Yeah.
this is not going to be pretty. It's not going to end well, but I've come this far, and he didn't give me a chance. Like he literally just like in one move, boom, he was in the creek, and I watched him go up the creek and on the other side, and out of my life at that point in time. And at that point in time, my whole world become unglued. Like I literally could not stop shaking. It was the biggest adrenaline dump I'd ever had, and it wasn't until he left that it happened.
Yeah.
Like God knows what would have happened if I would have actually put an arrow through him. I don't know what I would have done, but I would say that buck was probably. I wouldn't. It wouldn't shock me if that buck wasn't 220 inches.
I know several times now. You've like hesitated to throw it out there. I think because you're just like, I know you want to like in your mind. You're like, man, I know it sounds crazy, but I'm telling you, and
Yeah.
that's why I'm like, he's hesitating, but he's really trying to make a point on how big this deer was, and
Yeah.
I believe that you would know what a deer would like that look like, and that you haven't deviated from
No.
what your
No.
mind's eye experienced. And you know what's funny is it might be really great to cut that into this video. When you called me when I was still up on the hillside on the perch, I had my camera going when we were
Yeah.
talking, and you
Oh, that'd be
you
good.
you you I mean, I
Yeah.
never heard or never expected to hear from your voice in the state that it had become, because you
Yeah.
sounded like you were so distraught and you kind of just losing your train of thought, and I'm just kind of giggling and laughing. I'm like, he's something got him shook to the
Oh yeah.
and
That
then
deer definitely did. Yeah.
and
There's no doubt.
Like I'm counting them, I'm looking at every point, and I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this. Yeah. God, this place is insane.
Was he one of? Is he kind of like one of them white horned deer or?
Oh man, he would dwarf the one you took a picture of yesterday.
Oh, come on!
No, I'm not kidding.
Is he got?
I'm not kidding. He looked like something you see on freaking North American whitetail. He was probably a mainframe 12. I could count 6 on one side. I think he had 7 on the other side.
Good
I
God!
think he was like 13, but they were all like in the 10 to 15 inch range. The G2s, G3s, and he had kickers on the bases. I mean, he was a legit at least he's every bit of 190, and probably way more than that.
Good grief! Was he kind of one of them white horned deer?
Yeah, he was pretty wide. He still had like his bases were orange, like he'd been rubbing on something, but he was still caught all in the burrs on his base. He probably had 9-inch. One side was forked. His brow tines on the right side was forked, but they were about 9 inches.
God!
The one on the left was probably about 5 inches. The one on the right was probably about 9 and forked at the end. Dude, he was just
Unbelievable, huh?
yeah.
And to be that close to him, good Lord!
He was like, man, dude, I'm telling you, if you come down here and look, and I told you where he's at, you'd be like, there's no damn way. I mean, literally, he's probably 6 yards away from me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so dang close, so many times.
Yeah. Just his head, just from like the shoulder. I started shooting him in the damn head. I was like, he's gonna step out. I know that decoy is gonna get him, and he's gonna step out. I should have just shot the damn thing in the head and just said, hell with it,
Oh my
I don't
God!
know if I could sit here. I'm so damn tore up, dude. I don't think if another deer showed up right now, I just have to throw the damn crossbow away.
Oh no!
That's the damnedest thing that's ever happened to me.
Oh, I can't imagine. Good Lord!
It's just a shock. Like if I'd have been prepared for something like that, I was prepared for the 140. Like I'm okay with the 140. I ain't okay with that shit right there.
I don't think you could prepare for that one, especially being that.
I don't think no.
At
I
least
don't
if
think Josh Bomar
at,
prepared for that.
at least if you could have seen him coming, you could have. If you had 15 seconds or so, you could have had a moment to collect yourself. But he pretty much shocked your system for you.
Yeah, he put me into shock. Yeah, because I mean I heard the sound, but I was like I couldn't tell if it was. I thought it was to my left. I heard like boom 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 boom. It sounded like hoof prints, and I was like, I looked back to my left, back toward the little buck. And I was like, here comes another little buck. And when I turned back, I just saw like a movement of something coming out from behind the tree. And it was his head. And I was like, I just kind of glanced. I was like, holy like I was like, okay. I got my crossbow. I was sitting here thinking, he's going to walk right here between me and this brushy spot and walk out, And I was like, I just got to get my crossbow pointed into one of these little holes. He never moved. So I sat there for about, a minute, and I'm like, well, I got to get a good look at him because I can't. I don't think he's just frozen, And sure enough, I looked over there. I was like, holy shit, this doesn't even look real. And then I was just trying to compose myself enough to turn and get. And I wish you'd had it on camera. Like that was like one of the best slow motion. Like I got that damn thing all the way around onto his head, and he never even looked over here.
Oh my goodness!
And he just freaked out. Because he was like, I could tell he was like, I don't. At that point in time, I'm like, I don't think he's coming out very much more. Like I've got to figure out a way to kill it. To get something.
What shot do you have?
Yeah, I was like, if I could lean forward a little more, but I couldn't the way I was sitting here. If I could lean forward, I could shot him in the neck, and I could have killed him. That would have killed him, But the way I was sitting here, I'm leaning back, trying to get that crossbow over to him, and it was cutting the parts of his neck off,
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, he's just either going to have to walk out or, he's going to walk out of my life, one or the other. And he took out. I'm done. I gotta go back to the truck and compose myself. I'm not kidding.
You might need a shot of whiskey to calm that down.
Yeah, I can't even feel my tongue. That's how bad we've gotten.
Oh, shame.
Let's just. I'm gonna have to get out of here and recoup. I couldn't. If a deer walked out right now, I wouldn't be worth a shit. I just have to throw the bow at it.
I don't blame you. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we'll just back out of here before I accidentally shoot something in the ass. Keep my shit together.
Yeah.
Let's go see if we can find one somewhere else.
All right, sounds good. All right,
Bye.
Before we even finished talking, I mean, you were talking about hanging in there, but then eventually you were just like, you know what? Sitting here ain't doing me no good because I'm not going to accomplish anything. I got to get out and breathe.
No, if that deer would have shown back up 5 minutes later, I'd have just had to throw the crossbow at him. Like that was all I could have done because there's nothing else would have happened. And just the adrenaline dump was just so was so high on that for that buck. And I guess it's just because I don't know if it was so much the size, but it's just okay. Everything has come together here, and I have just worked so hard to get. Because I mean, it felt like because I mean, we were standing there like you don't have 200-inch deer within 10 yards for like 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't, and that's about how long he was there. It's about 10 minutes, and he's just in one spot. And I'm and so it was just a whole 10 minutes of just trying to get in that position. And then I can't make the shot. I can't get him to just move, like I'm just trying to wheel this deer another 4 yards, just get out from behind that tree, dude. I don't want to shoot you in the head, like that's not what I want to do, like and it just all came apart at that point in time. And like I said, I just at that point in time, it's like I got to get it's fight or flight. Like if I sit here, I'm just going to keep thinking about this. I got to regroup.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So
yeah,
I headed down from my little perch and circled around and kind of met you at the one of the fence gaps over there. And I really mean this in all honesty. When I saw you come out of the kind of the timberline and you had this slow, weary walk of
yeah,
like a newborn giraffe, like kind of head out. Like I'm telling
yeah,
you, you looked literally weak in the knees, and I was like,
yeah,
why does he look different? Something looks different. And then when you
yeah.
just got close enough, I just, and I was being 100%. I was like, are you okay? You don't look, you don't look well.
I didn't
Something's
feel
wrong. And
well.
you were just like,
No.
I'm not well. That was,
Yeah, I don't
it
know
was
how I
too
climbed
much.
over the fence. I told you right then. I was like, I don't know how the hell I got over that fence. Like I felt like my legs would not work. Like when I stood up. Like yeah, I'm like I don't know
Uh,
how I made it over that fence and got down. I don't know, but I mean that's and if you don't have those experiences, it does. Like if you don't experience that, I can imagine not having that experience
yeah,
when having something like that. Like I can't imagine missing out on something like that because that's forever a memory. Even though I didn't harvest the deer, didn't kill him and didn't get him. He's not hanging. I'm not. He's not at my taxidermist now.
mm-hmm,
But it didn't matter. In the long run, not many times you're gonna have that kind of experience at that size of a deer. I know I don't, especially down here in Alabama.
yeah,
Like that was unreal for me.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, it shook me up even after the fact. Just seeing your reaction and hearing the weakness in your voice, it's
yeah,
just like,
yeah, oh
man,
yeah,
I don't know what happened in there, but it was something's got
yeah.
him so tore up. He needs to sit
Yeah.
down. Somebody,
Yeah, those are powerful moments. Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, it had to be. I would love to hear the video because I can't even remember what I said. There's no telling what came out of my, but when I had called you, I had already kind of like, if I had to put that into words right after watching that deer run away, like I had to, there was, I was having to come to Jesus meeting before I called you, with like everything that's going on here, because
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
I can't believe this this just happened,
yeah,
and it was a whole situation there for like 7 or 8 minutes that I was having with myself before I ever got on the phone with you.
yeah, yeah. I'll definitely have to carve out some of those, some of that audio, and like I said, I'll be putting a hunt together for the whole thing anyway. Which,
Yeah,
there'll be several clips of, because I got to spend that last day with you pretty much because first of all, I had my vehicle was kaput, so I couldn't do no good sitting at the house. So I was like, well, I'll just go with you, and we'll see
yeah,
how all this kind of works out. Which it was a lot of fun, and it was. I wish I could have. But one thing is your type of setup that last day. It was like, man, I really don't want to get in there and risk kind of like, messing up your hunt. So I played spotter to try to spot some activity
yeah.
and cue you in on, hey, there's a buck that just crossed the field. He's heading east. He just dipped down in the bottom you're in. And hopefully we could have, the thought was that if we could use that to our advantage and work out for you, it would have been
Oh
awesome.
yeah. No, I mean, if we'd have been able to, I think if we would have, if you would have been able to stay, and then I'd have stayed healthy and not gotten down and out, I think we would have. I think we would have had something within a couple days
Yeah.
of just something epic was going to happen.
Yeah.
Like
It was building up to that
yeah,
100%.
yeah,
Yeah, and then you ended your trip kind of on a sore note. You got really really sick that last day. I left that night because my truck was having issues, and I got it from the dealership, and it was running. So I was like, I've got to drive this
yeah.
thing
You got to go
home.
home.
And I didn't. I literally drove for 11 hours without even turning it off. I even got pulled over by the cops, and you know. And then the first thing I told him, I said, "I listen. I apologize, but I cannot turn my truck off." He just kind of looked at me sideways a little bit. I said, "I'm having vehicle issues." I said, "I can't, if I turn it off, it might not start back up." And he was, "Okay, no, that's fine." He was real nice about it. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, definitely some other. Man, I look back on it and I was like, man, it'd have been great not to have so many problems, but would it have been the same type of trip? That's it's. But when it costs you time, that's so valuable. You know, it's it's a little sore, but you know, it is what it is at this point. You know,
Yeah.
and here we see it.
You just enjoy and think about the time you did have. You know, like that's really all. The same thing with me. Like I can't dwell on the fact that I got sick, got a kidney infection that knocked me out. You know, like I'm just. I look at it now like I used it. Everything out there was a learning experience for the next time. You know, and it's only made me want to experience it even more. You know, like
Man, I know I hate to say it, but uh, I'm in love with Kansas even more. I don't, and then so I don't know how that's going to look going forward. But and I appreciate the state being open, you know, and allowing non-residents, and you know, I just feel like we live in such a great time, you know, for opportunity that to be able to do that. You know, I was even appreciative of that state on that level because things are ever changing all the time, every year. You know.
yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
that's another topic for a different day. But man, I appreciate you. We've gone a little bit over on what I said, but we're pretty close. But I really appreciate you kind of stopping and taking the time. I know it's kind of middle of the day type of time frame, and you're a busy guy, man. But I really appreciate it. I had so much fun out there.
Man, I appreciate you joining me out there, and I'm glad at least one of us got to bring something from Kansas back home, other than pain and misery. So, yeah, but yeah, it was fun, man. I enjoy hunting with you more than I probably do anybody. You know,
Yeah.
like we mesh really well, and that's hard to come by. So
Yeah.
it's fun. I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I appreciate that because I definitely feel the same. It's kind of hard to find. I'm very much like a loner type hunter, but
Yeah,
you know,
me
it
too.
was super fun for us to do our thing and then come back and really see what we were seeing, and I feel like I learned a
Yeah.
lot more that way as well. You know,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah. When you got somebody there that's kind of on the same wavelength with you to kind of do what you do and what we do together, um, it makes not being successful worth it. You know, like it didn't matter. You're there with good buddies. You know,
yeah.
a lot of people just put the focus on killing. If the focus is just on killing, then you've lost the battle before you ever started. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, you're missing a whole different type of value there. I
Yeah.
agree. So, well, I'll let you run, man. I'll go ahead and close it out. And but just so everybody knows, you can find Shane at November Warrior, the Grounded Hunter,
Yeah.
Facebook,
All that good stuff.
YouTube. Yep. And I will say, you know, when Shane posts something, it's always worth viewing because especially a video content reels, because when you post things, you put a lot of thought, and it's usually something very strategic, very tactical. You know, you're very intentional about what you post, and I get that a lot of feedback from even our folks over here. You got a lot of folks in Texas that really appreciate, you know,
Well, I
what you
appreciate
do.
that.
Yeah, and they're like, you know, they see your face when we're sharing your stuff, and they're just like, "Is that Shane Parker?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's him. Yeah, he's, you know, he covers all kinds of ground, you know." So,
Oh yeah, yeah. I need to get to Texas and hunt down there with you someday soon. So
oh yeah, that would be a blast. We can definitely find some woods that would make you comfortable. I just saying, listen, I know there's some really big ones in there. All you got to do is go in there and find him. And I have no doubt you'd get
I'd
on him
stumble upon him
eventually.
probably. I might not kill him.
Yeah. So, well, I appreciate it. Thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna drop some clips from the hunt in here too, and we'll probably put a note at the beginning. So, and then maybe some of Shane's phone conversation, and then Shane really got probably better deer footage than I did during this whole trip because he filmed some studs, and like you said, that one deer, that big dark deer coming across that field was Oh man, that was incredible to see. So it was really a blast, but we'll share some of that throughout the video. Hope you enjoyed it, and appreciate everybody listening. Thanks for watching the video version, and go check out Shane. Give him a follow. Like I said, you can find him at November Warrior, the Grounded Hunter. He's got that Facebook group has really kind of taken off too. There's a lot of folks ground hunting these days, and Shane's one of the best. So thank you guys, appreciate it, and thank you, Shane, and we'll see you on the next one.